privilege to introduce the moderator for this next panel discussion. She is on the Female Founders Steering Committee. She's been working closely with me on making all of this happen. So Shuo, I want to introduce you. So Shuo is a founding partner of IOVC and EdgeLVC, CEO of ShyNet, which is Silicon Valley-based community of 3,500 engineers interested in entrepreneurship, and a board member of North America Blockchain Association. At IO and Agile, Shuo has invested in and helped various startups globalize and expand into new markets. Prior, Shuo worked at Goldman Sachs in investment banking, where she was involved in deals including Alibaba's $21.2 billion IPO, the largest IPO in US history. So a round of applause for Shuo.
So much for hosting us, Shuri. I'm really excited to see everyone and finally be at the summit. So I was helping out with our first one earlier this June, but unfortunately I missed out because I was on a business trip abroad. So I'm really glad to finally make it to our second Female Founder Summit. And Shuri has done an amazing job, so really excited to chat more. But without further ado, I would love to welcome my fellow panelists onto the stage with me. And we'll start with brief introductions.
Hi, my name's Jean. I am an investor at Data Collective, where I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can merge the physical and digital worlds and think about how we can use AI and data to optimize processes and capital assets. And before this, I was with McKinsey, did a lot of work in enterprise technology strategy, data strategy, innovation strategy, and a lot of their work on automation, figuring out what kinds of jobs would be displaced by AI and robotics. Prior to that, MIT double majored in brain and cognitive sciences, focused on modeling the brain using machine learning. Right before Jeff Hinton published, unfortunately, maybe I wouldn't be doing this if he did it earlier. And then finance and management over at Sloan.
Oh, we have enough microphones.
Oh my goodness.
I know. There we go. Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Larco. I'm a partner at NEA. I focus both on consumer and enterprise investing, from seed all the way through growth rounds. NEA is a $3.3 billion fund. We invest in the US and overseas as well. Before joining NEA, I was in products, so I led the product team at Box for all of the user-facing applications. I was at Twilio, and then I spent, before that, 5 years in gaming, Xbox, Playdown, my own gaming startup. So I've spent time in both consumer and enterprise. That's kind of why I straddle the fence on both when it comes to investing.
Hi everyone, I'm Kara Egan. I'm a senior associate at Emergence Capital. We are a B2B focused venture fund. We primarily invest in Series A, but we'll also do some B and C as well. We initially were kind of the first investors in SaaS, so the first institutional in Salesforce. We're also investors in Box, Gusto, Zoom that you might know right now, as well as Yammer, SuccessFactors. So a long history. We are looking at B2B future of work technology. Some of the areas of focus that we have right now are vertical SaaS, so attacking a specific vertical or industry. Also deskless workers, so looking at areas where employees have typically been underserved by technology. And then our newest one is called Coaching Cloud, which is using AI and ML to augment and accelerate human learning as opposed to automating humans away. My background is I went to Stanford undergrad and did engineering, and then I started in venture back in Boston for an education technology venture fund. And then I left with one of the partners to found a fund called 406 Ventures that was focused on SaaS, healthcare IT, and IT security. Two of the partners are operators before, and I always sort of valued what they brought to the investment table as well as our portfolio companies. So I went to Wharton and got my MBA, and then transitioned in 5 years at various startups at different stages. So I was at a company called Backupify that was raising in Series A. I was at Zendesk out here through the IPO, and then joined another company called Stitch Labs, always in product marketing and partner marketing roles.
My name is Alistair Schruger. I'm one of the founding partners of Creative Ventures. We're in a seed stage fund focused, I suppose the simplest way to describe it is real technology into what is colloquially known as the real economy. So we do a lot of construction, manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, that sort of thing. Specifically looking at businesses that are suffering from fundamental macroeconomic shifts like the aging population. We do a lot of robotics, we do a lot of AI, we do a lot of vision stuff. My background is sort of half English, half American, and got my career started off working in India for the largest tractor company in the world. Then some investments in the UK, ran operations on a gold mine in the Philippines, and then sort of wound up back in San Francisco, started a few companies, and decided to try to get more capital pointed at areas that needed it. And along the way, wound up investing into about 40% female founders. So excited to be here.
So I think we're all in for a real treat today because our panelists have all had really diverse backgrounds, including experiences being a founder themselves or having prior operational or product experience or prior investing roles. And so I think it'll be really great to hear a broad diversity of views. And on that note, I wanted to have all of you share a little bit more about your previous experiences and how that informs your investing roles now, whether it's a previous investing role at a different fund and how that looks differently than what it looks now, as well as if you had prior operating experience, a little bit about that, how that makes you make better judgments for investments.
Should I start? Okay. So very quickly about data collecting, because it will actually influence this answer. We are really, really focused on deep technology. So novel, proprietary technologies or scientific advancements that address multi-billion-dollar problems. Pretty sector agnostic, but really, really focused on deep compute and really novel data. And that means that we're like a team of technologists, and I think that going in, it's really, really easy to be excited at seed. It's like, this is the coolest thing ever, it's the coolest cryptography I've ever seen, it's the coolest algorithm I've ever seen, all of these things. And I think that my experience at McKinsey, though, watching people actually adopt technology and try to innovate, even when you throw like $100 million at innovating and have it from the CEO, it's really not easy. And a lot of the issues have a lot more to do with organization, interpersonal dynamics, right? And like being able to apply that lens and how these people's products fit a larger scope of their customers has been really, really critical for me to understand that element of technology is absolutely necessary, but not sufficient for the business.
Yeah, I think my background has been a bit of a double-edged sword. So founders come in, they tell us about their vision, and then I get really excited and I can just run with it like a product manager. Like, okay, great, so this quarter you should build that, and then you should prioritize it this way, and of course it's all going to work out, and we can make it happen. And then I realized I have to step back and actually think about, can this team execute on it? Am I projecting my vision onto them? And so it took a while to start separating myself from what the company was trying to do. On the other hand, it's been really helpful when looking at some of the metrics. So in products, sometimes you fudge a little bit of metrics to get funding for the following quarter, or so your project doesn't get killed right off the bat. And so it's really easy to dig into metrics and try to figure out what's actually happening. And seeing if the product's really delivering value to the customers as the entrepreneurs say it does. And so that's been a lot of fun because most of the time you get the look of like, wait, how did you know to ask that? I've been there.
Speaking of fudging numbers, prior to the panel, Jean and I were also talking, and she was saying how when it comes to market sizing, a lot of the numbers you were helping with at McKinsey. So whenever someone cites that, you're like, I kind of know how these numbers came to be.
Yeah, we published a big study about like the impact of AI in jobs, and every so often I like get slides that I made put back to me in pitch decks, and I'm like, yeah, I was really tired that night. I know what the assumptions are. I was like, that one. So yes, you pitch me, don't over rely on those numbers. And it's a great firm. The study itself is completely legit. But if you want to get into the details of exactly every single one, you know, there's a lot of assumptions that these things are built upon.
So we'll talk more about pitching in a bit, but please.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
I started on the venture side, and then going back and working on the operating side, I have a ton of empathy for what you guys are going through. Everything is so much easier on paper than it is when you're actually building it. So I think where this tends to show up for me when investing is just kind of giving people a little more leeway. Like, I know that we always want to paint the big picture, and I think you can get there, but I also know that if we have some questions around how it's going to get there, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions, and there's going to be a lot more once we invest and once we keep going. So for me, there's kind of like that understanding of what it actually takes now. Then I think from the product marketing standpoint, I like to kind of get in the head of the customer. Like, I know that we're not the customer. That's one thing as a venture capitalist I think is important. It's like, I'm not your buyer, and if I don't understand it, that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, you're not selling to me, you're selling to whatever your target customer is. But having been somebody who had to sell to target customers, similarly, I can ask them the right questions, like, do you know your customer? What is the channel that's working? What are the what's your CAC across those channels? So having a better sense of kind of what the go-to-market is something that I think I gained from working on the operating side.
So for me on the operating side, I think because so much of my experience has been in sort of weird situations, there were gorillas. Well, so the gold mine I was running operations for had gorillas in the hills and not monkeys, the other kind.
All right.
So I guess I tend to come at companies and expect, I don't necessarily think an enormous amount of about competition. I generally tend to assume a sort of base level of incompetence in most large organizations, and that level of incompetence generally increases, I suppose, exponentially, depending on the size of the organization in question. So tend not to care as much about competition as I think some other VCs, and tend to really like really weird solutions to problems, because a lot of the time that's what will actually make the difference. And if we think about some of the biggest companies today, when they first started out, they probably sounded pretty weird.
So all of you touched upon a little bit what you really like to hear in startups or when you come across founders the first time. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit more, especially since we have most of the founders in the audience today. So when you're hearing a pitch or a startup reach out, even before the pitch stage, let's say, what are some of the top things that you're looking for, and how do they make it relevant to you in your specific role now?
When it comes to the pitch, I would say, market size is really, really important. Especially for emergence, one of the things that's really wonderful is that we've had a lot of success. And so even though all VC is like, we're swinging for the fences, we actually really kind of are swinging for the fences. And I think that this is something that I know that I personally have a hard time with venture, because you say a lot of no's, right? Most of the times the answer is going to be, sorry, you're not a right fit for us. But that doesn't mean it's not a great idea. And sometimes it's a great idea, don't get venture and just try to bootstrap it. Sometimes it's a great idea for somebody who's looking for maybe a smaller exit. For emergence, we're really kind of looking for multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. If you haven't hit that, it's probably not the right fit for us. So that, and then the thing that everyone always talks about, the team, but that I can't always get a sense of in the deck.
Yeah, I would say with NEA, because our fund size is so big, if we're a $3.3 billion fund, we have to return at least $7 billion. So you don't make that 20 million at a time. You're making that by funding companies early that have $1 billion plus outcome. So we really have to be able to draw the line between where you are now and how you'll get to $1 billion. And if that's not very clear to us, it doesn't help us bring you in for a pitch. And then for market sizing, I would say there's people that cite McKinsey studies. We never go by those, sorry. We actually do bottoms up. So we try to figure out how many people...
Our bottoms up.
Yeah. So we were very realistic about what we think the attach rate is. And out of the big companies that are public today, that you might be hopefully disrupting, what's their market cap? What is their what multiple that they're trading at in the public market, and then we'll apply that multiple to your company, and then figure out how long it'll take you, given your projections, which everyone always misses, which is fine. But kind of how long we'll think it'll take you to get there, but we do a lot of diligence on that front, and if we realistically don't see a path to $1 billion, we can't invest, and that's typically what kills deals, which really sucks, because if it's a smaller fund, then you can be fine with a $200 million exit, but we can't.
I mean, so I think, yeah, team and market. One thing I do think a lot of people underestimate is the importance of the route to reach an investor. So this is something that I definitely work on, but I think is probably true for everyone. It's always a lot easier to get to an investor if and to have the investor take you seriously if you're referred by someone who has already made that investor money. So founder intros are always by far the best way to go, and most venture groups, and I think us too to an extent, do tend to sort of like look at provenance and how were they connected, and what are the sort of like, what's the level of credibility, I suppose, behind what sort of comes in.
That's very true, actually. I have always taken the intro from any of our founders. If our founder introduces to someone, I take the meeting. Even if it's a call, you never say no to founders, especially if they're one of the founders that are doing really well in your portfolio. So that's a very easy, quick win. And then there's also pressure you can apply to that VC person. So what you can do is after the meeting, if you know someone else that knows them, have them drop them a note and say, I heard you met so-and-so, they are great, they are killing it. And then the VC's like, oh yeah, totally, I totally saw that.
We're gonna look.
It works,
It
it
really
really works, it's surprising.
Never such thing as too many introductions to one person.
Unless they already said no, then don't keep doing that. Don't keep doing that.
I would space them out, don't put everyone in one phase.
Yeah,
Just spread it out.
Drip campaign, guys. Drip campaign. On top of that, I think also there are places like Google and Facebook and PayPal, right? So even if you don't know the startup community really well, but you have some really, really strong managers that were senior there that are like, hey, this person's just a killer, and I'm super sad that they left, but you need to go look at their company. That's also a very, very valid source of introduction. For us, I think, which hasn't been mentioned yet, is really, we are a very technology-focused fund, and I have to believe that you have something there. So if you put AI in your deck and you very clearly don't have AI, we'll figure that one out pretty fast, and that really does destroy a lot of your credibility very quickly, right? So this is pretty unique to us, and I don't think it's true to all venture firms, but aside from huge markets, we look for problems that we really, really care about on a global scale, like food security, physical security, energy, healthcare, that kind of stuff. And then we look for teams with either the professional or academic background to have built the technology that they said that they have, just because we need to see that in order to invest.
You don't feel AI is table stakes these days?
I think there are actually some problems. I talk a lot about this concept of technologically appropriate. People, when they pitch us, really, for obvious reasons, our whole spiel is about technology, they sometimes overstate what they're trying to do, or they apply this ridiculously complex system to what is 80% an organizational or data organization SaaS product problem. And that just shows that you don't actually know how to fit your product to the market that you're looking for. And I mean, there's examples of this is oh, we have this amazing computer vision algorithm. It's really, people just want the video of it itself and being able to see the video on their phone. That's 90% of the value you're delivering to.
I don't think AI is table stakes, to be honest. I think every leader should think about how AI would impact their business down the road. Sometimes it makes sense for it to be pulled up sooner. Sometimes it makes sense for it to be 5 or 8 years down the line. You should have an idea of how it would impact, but if you're just trying to force AI into your pitch,
you also need data. That's pretty critical too.
Data.
Before you can have the AI, you do need the data. This is very critical.
Yeah, we'll dig into that. We'll dig into how you're going to train the data and how that's going to scale and why you have proprietary, why you have an edge over everyone else. So if you haven't thought through it all, I would just leave it off.
So at the end of the day, when you're adding in words like data or AI that are kind of hot buzzwords, really think about whether or not it makes sense for your pitch. It doesn't automatically make it better. Oftentimes, if you already generate unique data, you probably don't need to highlight the AI capabilities, and investors will see that. So some really, really good practical tips. But we were also talking about kind of before the panel, thinking about the fact that a lot of founders do pitch and do get no's from VCs. And as investors, it also sucks to say no all the time or a lot of the times. And so it would be really helpful to think about kind of what are some of the ways that founders can think about overcoming some of those challenges, particularly because we have a mostly female founders kind of panel. Although just to add a little bit of context, I guess Vanessa and I were also chatting before, and we were saying how these type of challenges really never ends. It's not like a one-time issue and you only face these issues when you pitch the first time. It's like every round all the way until the end, there's always going to be challenges. So hopefully you can share some of those experiences there, all of you.
I mean, don't give up. Just because one person said no doesn't mean everyone's going to say no. Like I said, as you mentioned, like find the right fit for a firm. Like do your research. Like know who would be interested in you both from a technology standpoint, but also a fund size standpoint. You're going to get better with your pitch every time. So even if it should have been a yes, like maybe 5 in, you're going to finally get your yes. You're going to hit your groove. So maybe similar to like college. I think it was in college you tried to do this, where you would maybe have some likely schools, like maybe work out some kinks with some of your like less critical investors if possible.
I would really, really prioritize your list. And when she says do your research, like the best way to tell of what people are investing in currently is to look at their recent investments. Like go down Crunchbase and see, like look at the profile of what they're doing. Just because, like, to be honest, most of our VCs are pretty broad, right? Because you don't want to miss the next blank, but it will help you to get a sense, like if you have limited amounts of time to do it that way. And in addition, I would say ask people for like really harsh feedback first. You don't want your first pitch feedback to be in the pitch meeting. You should have gotten all the questions and really just actually have a list of what people keep asking you beforehand on hand.
Yeah, I would think about it the way you would some people think about job applications. You probably want to get your second choice and go through those, because you're probably going to bomb your first 2 or 3 pitches. So make sure that's not your first pick. And then I would say, my mom told me this when I was pitching and I was a founder, you only need 1 yes. So like you get all these no's, you're just like, you just need 1 yes. So like put the no's behind you. And then it's not always like, not every round is going to be like that. Sometimes there'll be a bunch of no's, you'll get that 1 yes, and you're like, all right, I'm good for 18 months. And then 18 months later, you could be the belle of the ball and everyone is courting you and everyone's throwing term sheets at you and you don't even know what to do. And then the round after that, it's again crickets. So, just take it one step at a time. You just need to make it to that next milestone. And I mean, it's a struggle like the whole way through. At every round, at every phase, you think the seed is hard, then the A is hard, and then everyone tells you about the B crunch. There's not enough VCs that invest in Bs, and then they're like, oh, good luck with a C. There's not enough investors that do Cs, and it's just every round. So it's one step at a time, and just know that all the founders, even the ones that IPO'd, had really bad, shitty rounds at some point in the spectrum. No one just gets like 1 million term sheets every round.
Actually, add that. There's times where you absolutely have to believe in yourself, right? Like somebody's not going to get it and you know better than they do. And then there's other times where you should listen to what the feedback is. And so if somebody is leaning towards a no, like try to get as much information from that VC about why it's a no. Like maybe it's something that you really hadn't thought about and you should be thinking about. So every no is an opportunity to strengthen not only your pitch, but your product, your company, your business model. So don't always think of them as like, I need to get out of here, I'm done with these people. Like there's something to gain from each of those conversations.
And if it's a yes, you can also ask for additional intros, right? Yeah. So that'll help you build momentum.
Yeah, and many of you will have multiple term sheets. I will say that. Like there are many scenarios where you're just going to walk in and everyone's like, holy shit, this is amazing. And so what I would say is be really nice to everyone else. Pick the term sheet that makes the most sense for you. And then the other term sheets, turn them down nicely. You will probably need their help in the next round. So, the rejection goes both ways. the rejection goes both ways. We get rejected, we get it.
The next round, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah. So, you know, you'll have wins, and just make sure you're treating everyone really well throughout the process.
Yes, I have had founders come back with like these nasty grants of all the things I didn't understand, and that doesn't fly. Because you know, when you pitch everyone else, like, hey, did you talk to these people? What did you think? And I'm like, well, here's the email they sent me. So, you know, if you want to deal with that on your board, feel free.
I've also had founders that have turned us down, and they were really great about it. They were like, here, like, this for this round, this is what we're looking for. We went with a partner that really matched, but I want to keep you in the loop and I want to keep you updated, and we have a great relationship, and hopefully for the next round we'll get there. And I've also had founders that we gave terms to and they went completely dark and never wrote back, and it's like, well, we spent weeks with you. We put our whole team on this.
Don't ghost your VCs, guys.
Well, you can at least just give me like a text, right? Like break up with me over text. I'll be okay.
You don't even have to disappear, even if it's a no, right? You can still stay nice and update folks.
Yeah.
I would actually say this is one of the most valuable things that you can do as a founder. Communicate early and ask for advice, and then communicate often and continually beat your estimates, projections, within reason obviously, but like generally show steady progress with people you are engaging over multiple months, if not multiple years. It can take a long time for people to get confident in an investment decision, because ultimately it's a marriage, straight up. And what I would actually add to that is, because it can take a long time, always cultivate multiple ways to keep your company alive. And sometimes that's not VC. That can be friends and family and pools. It can be strategics, family business, family businesses, customers, grants. I mean, who knows if those will still be here next year, but you know.
I think those are all really good tips for all founders. And so given that we're at a female founder summit, I thought it'd be helpful for us to touch on some of the practical issues, challenges, but also solutions that female founders face in particular. So Kara, I know you wrote a great article for the TechCrunch in the summer talking about some of the practical action steps that folks can take, not specific to founders, but relevant to just diversity in the workplace. And obviously, Alistair, it would be great to get your input as well, given we're mostly women-dominated panel, which is rare.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was actually chatting before this too at a board meeting that I was at, and they're like, what is the answer? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's the problem. Like, we're all here trying to figure out the answer, and I think that there's an element where venture capitalists have to start addressing the gender bias and the unconscious bias that we have. Like, it is absolutely a problem. It is, I think a lot of people are paying lip service to it and they're not making actual changes. And so that's kind of what the article has to do with. It's like, everyone says go hire somebody or go make an investment. That's harder to do, right? Like it takes longer. You might not have a role open, but there is today, you can go and you can make sure that you're being pitched by more women, right? Like you can go search on Crunchbase. So we have our own issues that we have to deal with. And I will help try to work on that. But thinking about some of the bias that creeps in, like how do you address it? And I think you were saying earlier, like, Jean was saying, do we want to act like men or should we act like women? Like, do we want to change how we are? Like, and I mean, I think no. I mean, be your authentic self. Your authentic selves got you this far. It's very impressive. You are very impressive. So, like, just trust in yourself in that way. And also, like, I don't think we need to change because I think all of the ways that we've been trying to change clearly are not working, right? Like, we're not as far as we need to be. So we need to try some different strategies. But I do think you do need to be mindful of what the bias is, right? So, for example, in the article I referenced some article from another article, but from an HBS article around the idea that women get asked preventative questions and men get asked promotional questions. And the promotional questions are kind of like, where are you going to be? And it's all positive, and preventative leads you down this darker path. And most people, 85% of people will answer like aligned with the type of question that they were asked. And so if you know that that's going to happen, maybe prep yourself to make sure that you answer the preventative question with a promotional answer. So like prep yourself to, and at the end, you don't want to dodge the question, so make sure you say, like, did I answer the question? But like make sure that you're getting your promotional statements in there, knowing that you might be led down a path that you don't want to be. So I think that you can kind of take the studies, and we need to work on that to make sure that we're asking 5 standard questions that are all promotional of everybody, right? But you can't assume we're doing our part, so kind of like flip it and read those articles and figure out how you might be able to kind of prepare.
And Alistair, you mentioned you actually work with 40% women in your portfolio companies, especially in robotics and in more traditional sectors. So it would be great to hear your perspective on this too.
Sure. I mean, so there's stuff on the VC side, and then there's stuff on the that I've observed on the founder side. I mean, I've certainly observed a fair bit of, as I'm sure everyone has here, there is a fair bit of bias and sexism and general asininity in the industry, although hopefully slightly less than there was last year. But I mean, I think one of the big things that I think I see other VC funds have as an issue, and something that we've tried to take steps to address, is because team fit and the impressiveness of the team is so important. I've definitely observed that all other things being equal, 2 people describing themselves in similar ways, if one of them is a woman and one of them is a man, the man will describe themselves as if they're 2 ranks up and 3 times as impressive, even if the woman was actually more senior, actually did more. And that's because, from what I've observed, there can be, women will oftentimes be sort of punished for, articulating, self-promoting, articulating how impressive they are. And I think that's definitely an area where it's required. It took us, we had to change how we were evaluating founders, because we found that we were evaluating based on what people were saying instead of how actually impressive they really were. So I suppose a piece of feedback that may be useful is think about how you tell your own story and whether it adequately captures how impressive you are, because my guess is it probably doesn't.
Jean, you also look at a lot of very technical-driven companies.
Yeah.
And so what's the percentage of female founders you work with, and what are some of the issues or solutions that you see there?
I don't think that I've actually done the exact analysis, but I'll be honest, it's probably closer to 20%, 20 to 30, which is actually more than a lot of infrastructure. But that sounds bad, but compared to the number of people who pitch me, that's actually a significant step up. And I think that one of the things that we've noticed even within our own portfolio is that most of our female-led companies have done better more quickly than we've expected, because they sort of understated what they thought they were going to go for, as opposed to, this is what we probably do, let's just 5x that, put it on our pitch deck. Perfect. So certainly do keep in mind that every startup misses their numbers, but being overly conservative in things can harm you in strange ways. Don't do I'm going to totally make numbers up, I can tell. But be careful with that. The other thing that I noticed that I am really trying to change at Data Collective is we had invested in actually a lot of women before I showed up there too. But the thing is that they all had unassailable resumes. Hey, I built Facebook's backend architecture for all these products. I headed up data science at IOST. It's okay, I have a PhD from Carnegie Mellon, I have a PhD from MIT. And if you have that, yes, you should absolutely take that to the table. That will shut up a lot of concerns around it. I think what we're working on is figuring out how we can take the same chances on younger, less experienced female founders in the same way that we've taken many, many chances on 22-year-old men.
That's a huge issue, yeah.
Pardon?
No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I hear you on being your authentic self, but certain things are difficult, right? Because when you think about the entrepreneur, it is legitimately hard. You do need a lot of confidence. You're constantly selling. You're constantly selling yourself. And no matter what I think, I know what many of my ex-clients thought, many of people I've worked with and met in industry think, right? So if you're going to do enterprise sales especially, you really do need to have presence, and to cultivate that is actually pretty important. An example is I was talking to this amazing computer science professor at UC Berkeley, and she's brilliant. Like, you know, she's well awkward, and I don't know. And eventually, I kind of just dropped a light note saying, "I know you're plenty smart, but this is disruptive, and you should work on it."
So I think we focused on a lot of things we need to overcome, but I think we also have a lot of benefits for being women. And I think that sometimes we take those for granted. And so in my career, especially in gaming, where it's like, I was at Xbox with only 3 women on my floor to 300 people. And so it's like, okay, there's plenty working against me, but there's like a few things I can very much exploit that will help me just kind of get ahead that no one has access to. And so find those two. There's a lot of resources for women. Find all of them. Figure out which one's going to help you the most. If there's a woman VC who just spoke at something, she's very passionate, she might be willing to coach you, or some angel investors. And, find your in. Like we do have some advantages, and there are some things that we do that women pitches that I don't see from men. They are very structured. I've seen women that come with a plan. Guys are just like, what's that? I'm going to be $1 billion. This is my vision. I'm a badass. My team's a badass. Fund us. And then women come in and they're like, okay, I'm going to get to $1 billion. This is how. And then this is what we're going to do this year. And actually, this is what we're going to do this quarter. And this is the experiments we're going to run. And based off this data, this is how I'm going to inform my next quarter. And then everyone's just like, holy shit, this person's really buttoned up. And so I have, you know, there's a lot of things we do bring to the table. I think there's a lot of advantages that we have. They're small, they're kind of hard to find, but finding them.
I would actually add to that a lot. One of the things that VCs are always looking for is they're always looking for deal flow. They're generally always looking for talent, and they're always looking to sort of have their pulse on things. And oftentimes, if you're a founder in a specific area and there maybe aren't a lot of other people in that area, you can position yourself as a domain expert. You can build upon the skill set you have and the networks you have. And I mean, I think that's something that I've seen some people really capitalize on, such that, you know, other people are basically afraid of offending them and, you know, really want their opinion and want their involvement. And oftentimes that will then translate into, well, if we're going to make a bet in this space, we have to make it with so-and-so.
Just really quickly, I totally agree with Vanessa. I think that women's networks are actually uniquely super strong, especially in San Francisco. Like, even compared to New York and Boston, I was like, wow, this is the first time, like, this sounds like a cheesy word, but sisterhood. Like, first of all, and women do talk, do you remember this? So some people are currently learning. But secondly, you know, I think because it's been paid forward to me so often, now I'm like, unless you have a really, really good reason, there's a special place in hell for you if you refuse to help other women, right? And I think, I got told this at a panel, like, by a coach, like, trust me, if you don't take that, you special place in hell. Think about the people who didn't do it for you. And like, fair?
I also think, actually build on that a little bit, like, it can be hard as a founder or CEO because you don't really have a peer group. And when I think about places where I've been successful, it's when I have like a little raw sisterhood. And it can be whether it's my business school classmates who know my skill set and who can help encourage me to go for something big, or whether it's my teammates that you have when you're an operating company. But as a CEO, like, it's kind of hard to be vulnerable or have your own team be encouraging you because you sort of like, I'm supposed to be that leader. So if you can, like, take advantage of these communities or people here today and get somebody who's just gonna be there encouraging you to kind of go for it, right? Like, I think that confidence is a big thing when you talk about being polished or whatever. Like, be confident, like, build your confidence. And I know that we all have self-doubt, but that's what your little team of cheerleaders is there for, to like tell you that you're awesome and know that you're awesome, right? Like, your mom will say it, but like, what does she know? So like, your peers, they know, right? So I try the best you can, but surround yourself with people who push you and have confidence in you.
Question you though also.
One of the things I love about Women's Network is that everyone's really honest. So most people will be like, oh, this quarter sucked. But when you came out with like the male entrepreneur groups, everyone's just bragging about how amazing everything is. And I feel like that makes it very, very lonely for them. And one of the things I hear about constantly from mostly our male founders is how lonely it is and how they're not able to express that they're lonely and how they're not able to express to anybody that they're going through a hard time. And so we're like, yeah, we'll tell everybody, I don't care. And so there are some benefits that come from it, and the network is really amazing. And so lean on each other and help each other, and know that there are some benefits.
And as you can tell by the dynamics of this panel in terms of answering this question, I think people are actively thinking about how to create more ins for founders and also very actively thinking about addressing this issue. And so I think it's really helpful for founders to find the right investors or the right folks in your community to engage. And Vanessa, I remember you mentioning earlier also that whether it's female founders or founders more broadly, it's important to find the right fit when you're pitching to a VC. So in addition to the fact of thinking about which gender you represent, it's also about what other portfolio companies have VCs invested in. And so I do want to give founders an opportunity to ask you all questions and to really have a conversation. So maybe we'll just wrap up really quickly and each of you can give them a piece of advice or next steps. It could be reading recommendations, or it could be something different, or an aspirational quote, anything that you want to leave everyone with.
Try to find someone in the industry that doesn't necessarily have it can be an advisor, but doesn't even have a vested interest in you, that you're not necessarily pitching, that will give you honest feedback, right? On your terms, on your pitch deck, on whether your business is actually going somewhere. Like, this is something I struggled with some of my good friends when they were starting their companies, and I was like, I want to encourage them, female founder, yay, on the other hand, I would never fund this in a million years. Like, where do you do that? And like, you want someone to be honest with you at the end of the day.
Yeah, and just because you're a female founder doesn't mean you have to pitch to a female VC. We have many of your portfolio companies that look at their portfolio that's around 40% women, 50% women. And they're great advocates, and they, like, all the way I would tell you, like, my female founders just have this hustle. They're like crazy committed. So find male advocates. Most VCs are men, so find the ones that are great advocates and work with those. And if you see some that have no women in the portfolio, that might be kind of an uphill battle. So just play with the probabilities. What's the probability that you'll do well with the person you're pitching?
I'm still thinking.
I can be ready. Not have more time, that's okay.
Yeah, I got the recommendations up and down.
Don't get disheartened, because it is really hard, and it probably is harder. I mean, I can't speak to it myself, but I definitely, for my founders, there are definitely times where sometimes it seems like it is harder than it should be. But don't get discouraged.
I think, it's along the same sort of lines, but like, let's get a little emboldened, you know? Like, I feel like we've been playing nice for a little bit too long. And I think we still have to toe the line and play the game, but like, let's call some bullshit out there. So I think my advice is like, let's go do this, you know? Like, let's try to figure out the way to, whether it's like, how do we actually behave? Is it our authentic selves? Is it some balance? But like, let's start calling it what it is. Like, let's start calling it sexism when it's sexism and not just gender bias. You know, like, let's start calling it racism when it's racism. Like, let's stop playing a little nice and let's be a little more emboldened. I know that this year definitely made me more emboldened, and I'm ready.
And I think that's a great note to end on, because you all made the first step to even be here in the first place. And Google's Female Founders community is a really great community to be a part of, and there's plenty of great mentorship programs that folks are putting together here. So absolutely get to know each other and also ask questions. And so with that, we'll open up to Q&A.
Hey!
I'm Sarah. I have a comment and a question for the panel. And I've been in business probably longer than a lot of people in this room. I did 10 years in finance and 10 years in tech, and I worked on Wall Street in the 90s. So, I was definitely Weinstein, and, we have another discussion about that. But, my mother always says to me, she's 75 years old, she said, I marched 50 years ago for the hoping that we would have different situation than you do. And so kudos to you guys, because I think that we're all talking the talk, but it's time to walk the walk. And so I have just a suggestion and a question, which I think a lot of the founders are having. So my suggestion is, I pitched at an Andreessen contest, and it was co-ed. I happened to get second, and another one got first, so we got 1 and 2. And I was really impressed by the person who won. She's not here because she left to go to another meeting, but everybody needs to join it. It's called the Guild. It's a female-to-female networking app and platform, and I have a bunch of free cards. I'm happy to pick them out and give you code. It's AI meets LinkedIn, and it's fantastic. That's the reason she won. Her demo just killed it. But it's literally, we're all searching on LinkedIn for that contact, for whatever we need. I've spent half my career, more than half, in sales, and we're all constantly looking for who do we need to meet, how do we make that meeting happen. We spend half of our day making those contacts happen. This is pushing that information. You tell it what you want, and it pushes and sets it up for you, syncs with your calendar. It makes those meetings and those live conversations happen instantaneously. It also runs on a corporate intranet. So if you're interested, come talk to me. I mean, I was so wowed by her, and I have a B2B sales background. She has an AI background, and I said I wanted to help her because I see my company scaling, but the Andreessen partner looked at her and said, she looked at me and said, you have a great company, keep at it. She has a $1 billion business. And I was so wowed, and she was so passionate that I was like, I have to help her. So, but it's all, the app and the Guild platform is about women helping women. So we all need to get on it right away. And so, but here's my question. So my question for you guys, and I think that you kind of answered it a little bit, and this is a question / frustration of mine, is that a lot of angel investors, VCs, whatever bucket they fall in, say they do seed. When you actually talk to them, they want $1 million+ in revenue or 50,000 subscribers. And to me, I'm like, okay, I know what a seed is. Seed is below the ground. If I'm sorry, but it is. Seed to me isn't $1 million in revenue. Seed is seed. Seed is seed.
It depends on which fund.
Okay, but if you say you do seed, in my mind, that should be funding someone to their first $1 million, or funding someone to their first $500,000. So, and I think we as women, because there is this bro culture, we're not great at making those angel connections. Because quite frankly, where I'm at and where Guild's at, we need angel investors. Yep. And hey, women do 27% of the pitches, that's the last stat. We need to be doing 50. But female entrepreneurs now more male entrepreneurs by 60%. So these investors, 96% of them are still men, need to be funding women, not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's actually a better investment. Yes. So you guys need to shout that from the rooftops to all the other men that you work with.
So seed has changed a lot.
Seed has really changed.
So when a $3.3 billion fund says they do seed, they do like a pre-series A. It's basically like, you're not quite there for the A. We probably want to lead your A, so we're going to put money in your seed. We don't lead seed rounds because we don't scale. We won't be able to help you a ton. So we actually look for a micro VC, or for you to have angels that are very active, or for you to have, there's a lot of seed funds that are popped up recently, and we want to know that there are people around you that are investors that will help you get to the A round, and then we'll take the baton at that point and run with it. So you have to know how big is the fund. If it's a $20 million fund and they're writing $100,000 checks, then they do like the real seed.
And on top of that, I think like the words too early will come up a lot when you get told no. Sometimes it's truly too early, sometimes it's a nice way to say like it's not a fit. I try not to do that because I realize that's just a useless term. But the thing is like what seed needs is different for different companies. If we do D-Tech, I've done series B's with like 0 revenue, right? And we do early seeds, like great ideas, and really the only people who build it and the tech is there, right? With also just prototype code. So like, if your business is actually based on like customers, consumers adopting it, almost always like seed definitions have changed. To the angel question, activation networks, right? If you have actually worked on Wall Street and on tech, right? Which is not true of everyone, right? But there's a lot of McKinsey partners that are looking at doing interesting Silicon Valley investments, right? Like if I were to go start a company, I'd do that. Venture people, friends that I know that like are now relatively senior software engineers at Google. There's activation networks.
Ask people for money. Just ask your network for money.
Yeah.
I would
it's just about to add on really quickly that it's also the just bar for different rounds of all rates. It's not just at a stage level, it's every single round, right? And so even at a stage level, a lot of people do friends and family and even just try to bootstrap as far as they can. But if you can prove that with the amount of capital that you put in, you can show the progress, that's also meaningful.
Can we have the other two people also talk about what seed means to their process?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most of them we don't do seed. So, and we might, I don't even know what we say on our website, we're changing it, so don't even look at it, also because it's all like, all white men. I think it's just creeped up, right? So now there's a lot of money in like the angels, and then there's like super angels, and then there's micro VCs, there's angels, there's angel VCs. So there's a lot of money out there down below, and so it's confusing them. Like sometimes you see a Series A and you're like, this is the Series B, like what is going on? And vice versa. So for us, I mean, the main reason, it kind of goes back to doing your research about the fund. Like if you actually just think about it, we're not huge like NEA. We actually are pretty small. We're like a $370 million fund. We're in our fourth fund, and we're structurally set up to actually only do a couple investments per year per partner, like one per partner, because we actually like to get really hands-on and help the companies, and so we actually have to make sure that structurally we are set up to do that. But my point is, for us it's kind of like, we do have the money to pay up at the A, and there's just a lot of risk at the seed, so typically we're kind of like, really awesome, but we'd love to stay in touch, but it probably makes more sense with our bandwidth, especially if we're only going to do one deal and we only have, we would want to get really, really helpful with the company. It's probably just like a little too early for us to make the most of our time.
I'm about to give the most annoying answer of all, which is, it depends. One of the seed deals we did had a $10 million joint venture contract when we did it. One of the seed deals we did had a pilot with Hilton. One of the seed deals we did had no revenue to speak of. One of the seed deals we did had LOIs in the amount of a couple of million. Like, it varies enormously. The creep is real. My general attitude is try to get as much customer validation as you can before you take money as early as possible.
Question, with all of those companies, they had gotten to that level or had that thing, but were they still like a sub $2 million raise? Or were they raising?
Yeah, sub $2 million.
Thank you for the panel. I was wondering, what is the company that you said no to that was actually looking to say yes? And at the time, was there a data point that would have changed your answer from no to yes?
I've only been in venture for a year, so no one's, I don't have a data points to be proven wrong yet. So I don't have a good answer. It takes so long for these cycles. I think one of the hardest, and okay, maybe it woes me with VC, but when I was in products, you get feedback right away. You feel really fast. Like you put a feature out, you're like, oh, this is terrible, move on. In venture, you say no, and you're like, yeah, that's for sure not gonna work. And then like 10 years later, it does amazing. And so like you're not wrong for 10 years, and then you're very wrong. So I guess ask me like 5 or 10 years.
To be honest, I think we spend more time regarding certain things that we did do than the things that we don't, because you're gonna miss some stuff, right? Like, you have a thesis, you have how everyone's feeling, right? And don't forget that like all of us work in the context of firms as well, and even if you are the managing partner of the GP, like nothing just gets done unilaterally when you want it, and if someone else doesn't like it, I don't usually think that we're missing data. It's more just that the data didn't convince someone based on their set of experiences, whether it was like, I invested in this in 1992 and it didn't work, and now I don't like it anymore. Like, that happens.
That happens so much.
It's a lot.
Especially with really old venture firms. Like we got really burned on the energy sector in the 2000s, and so any energy thing comes up now, and everyone's like, oh no. But it's different. It's like 17 years have passed, and everyone's like, yes. No,
It's actually funny though. They're like, oh, look at who they like recently invested in, because when I used to be in education and technology fund, it was like, and then the partner that I left to join the other company with, like, we wouldn't touch an education company. Like, we had so much scar tissue there that it was like, you would have thought he was a good one to go to, but I'm like, oh God, he would have been the worst to go to. So.
I'm the worst to come to for gaming, and I have a very sensitive gaming background. Everyone pulls me in, I'm like, you don't want me in that meeting. I have had so many bad experiences. Like, pick anyone but me. You don't want me in your pitch.
Just really quickly to contextualize the fund size too, if you're a relatively small fund, you probably can't miss a deal because by the next round it's already too large for the smaller fund. But vice versa, if you're a really large fund, it's probably right to pass at a really large stage for an investment later round. So just so you have context in terms of which stage, whether seed or Series A or B, we're talking about.
Maybe one last question. Two last questions. What? We have a hard stop.
Good evening. I just have a quick question in regards to, I don't know if this is confidential or not, but what percentage of your portfolio is actually referral based?
Almost all, probably like very little comes in of the transom. It's really like we're well connected people. It's not that hard to even get like, you might not get the perfect founder executive intro, but it's not that hard to find a connection to me, even the first executive brain.
I do hate that.
Yeah.
By the way, I do really hate how it's referral based. And Social Capital is a rival firm, but I will say that they launched Capital as a Service, and they basically don't care about anything other than your metrics when you apply online. And if they compare it to all the benchmarks we have internally, and if it meets the bar, they just invest without meeting you. And they found that it's like 40% women and minorities that they're funding, and that doesn't come close to anyone's portfolio. And so I do think that this referral thing keeps people out. It keeps women out, it keeps minorities out, and I hate it.
Yes.
On the flip side, I get a ton of like pings on LinkedIn of like, here's my company. And when I first started, I was like, I'm gonna read every single one because this is how we break the cycle. And I didn't sleep very much. And I took almost every call, and none of it went anywhere. And then I just burned out. And then it was like I need quality inbound, but I don't have a good way right now. So I hate it. I want to fix it. Unclear how. I don't want to copy Social Capital.
But, so I would say, agreed, most is inbound, but people or referrals, sorry. Most people want to go talk to the GP or the partners. Like, don't be afraid of the lower level people. Like, those guys are out there hustling. They're trying to source. Like, if you can put a great pitch in front of them, they're psyched, right? Like, I mean, at our fund, we're always trying to build new relationships because the partners have awesome ones. And you're like, well, what's the next new thing? Like, how you already have all the good ones? And so we're always looking for new seed relationships, new, who's a Series B, you might want to pass something before it's ready, but go to the young guys. Like, they're hustling, they're trying to make their name, and they're more open to it, really.
For sure. I hear that the Stanford MBA program tells people not to talk to the associates and to only talk to partners and GP. And I just laugh because when GPs have the highest quality network, they're not going to take a cold email. The associates don't know anybody. They will take a cold email. And if they get excited about you, they take it to their GP. And even if the GP is not super excited, they want to show support for the associates. They'll go, okay, bring them in. I'll sit in on it. But you got it in. Who cares how you got it in? You got it in. And then the associate will do all this work to prep you. They'll pull all the numbers that look great because they want to look good because they brought this into their mentor. So do not dismiss the associate. Also, do not piss off the associate.
Yes.
Because just like you can make data look good, you can make data look terrible. And I've seen many deals that were sunk by the associates. They were just kind of like, this is terrible. Here's like 50,000 reasons why. And the GP's like, yeah, you're totally right. Because I'm sure you did all the homework, and if that's your conclusion, I mostly agree. So don't piss off the associates. Be nice.
And a really quick plug for Google Launchpad. I've actually seen you at a couple different events here, and you always ask great questions. So being a part of a community like the female founders community here is also a great way to be quote unquote in. And so I think you're absolutely already taking the right first step.
especially if the GP tells you to go talk to the associate, please, please, please don't continue emailing their EA forever asking to talk to them because it will never happen.
Great. Well,
You can't end on that. That's like a stupid answer.
yeah. Okay. Then one more question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pressure has to be the best, most interesting question.
I'm just curious, you guys have been awesome, by the way, serious, and I'm sure you hear that a lot, but I really appreciate it.
We really don't.
This was a great question. You're right.
This is how I wanted it to end for you, okay, really quick. Seriously, say we've done all this great advice that you've given us, all of our research, we've lined it up, we know exactly who we want to pitch, we know exactly what it is. We don't have a referral, and we don't have a background going to Stanford, but we do have metrics, like you're saying, social capital, and we do have purchases or customers that we're bootstrapped in. What is your best way of getting in front of somebody without having privilege and really having the product go and really being able to show that? No worries there, but maybe not being, hey, I'm more of a risky bet. I'm not this person. How do you find those VCs or angels, as we're talking about seeds, who are maybe a little bit more aggressive, a little bit pushing the envelope and giving more chances to people that aren't measuring up to necessarily the resume that you guys lined out today?
Yeah, what I will say is that some of these accelerators and incubators are actually really good for that. Y Combinator is huge now, it's 120 companies, everyone eye rolls. They read everything. They read all the applications. If you've got traction, you need the metrics, they'll pull you in. You go to YC and you'll be hooked up with like every network ever. But there's 500 startups, there's a bunch of these, and the whole point of them is to get you in some network. And even the lesser known ones, there's like one angel person that might know someone that knows someone. And so don't discount them, apply to them. I know they take a bunch of equity, but it's worth it to get the introductions.
If you have a geographic reason, okay, if you live in San Francisco and you can't find someone, just hustle a little harder, talk to some people in the lines, it'll work out. Like there are enough people here. If you don't live in San Francisco, I actually think that we developed incredibly good relationships with geographic accelerators, right? And like, to be honest, like quality sometimes, but I read all of their emails, like these are the companies that I'm excited about, and that can bring you in, because it's just like someone that I will at least read the email carefully.
Yeah, because you know they filtered it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's thought about it.
I also think we keep saying like hustle, but get creative. I don't know if your product sells to, I don't know if your product sells to customers, but it should. But like if one of your customers could speak on your behalf, I mean for us, like that is a huge part of all of our diligence. Like when those customers, they rave and they're the industry experts and they're the ones with the dollars and the wallets opening up. So again, like sometimes that creative thing where it's like, oh, one of your customers is actually one of the portfolio companies, right? And if, even if your contact is the, you sold into the engineering board, like just them paying, like we listen to that, right? And we also go to those people when we have a company. We're like, hey, like we see that you're using them, or like, would you ever use them? So, I mean, try to get creative and think about the people that like can actually speak to your value, which like a customer can do.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you for coming in today. This was really, really awesome. Thank you. So we're going to share contact information with some of our speakers and some of the investors as well, so you can reach out to them.
Yeah, mention that you were at this though. Like everyone can know us. It's kind of like forward your session.
Yeah. Well, a big round of applause to our amazing investors that took the time to come here today. Thank you so much. This was really great. Thank you very much. I know everyone